Dr. Ricola, Exovol exclaimed as his silvery orb floated closer. Will there be any long-term negative consequences to these injections? I am worried about Mika's well-being. Oh, hello, Exovol. It's nice to speak with you again. You needn't worry. There will not be any long-term consequences. Her O-key genetics are far too powerful to do such a thing. In fact, it's actually quite astonishing. I have medical knowledge of over 500 races, and in all of those races, I have never seen a race so genetically stubborn as the O-key. In fact, while examining the DNA sequences, I was actually overwhelmed by the startling differences between O-key genetics and that of other races. And that being that there doesn't seem to be any flaws, misplaced genetics, or genetic remnants. It's as if O-key genetics were crafted, perfectly tailor-fit. What? I don't understand, Doctor, Exovol replied. It's really quite simple, Exovol. All beings, regardless of where they come from, have massive amounts of genetic information. Lots of this genetic information is of course used to create who they are, the building blocks for every living organism. However, within their genetic structure, there are always outdated or inconsequential genetic sequences. These are from previous genetic iterations, failed genetic avenues, physical weaknesses that they've evolved beyond, and countless other things. They're much like garbage cluttering up the space of the DNA sequence. For example, a species might evolve with a specific organ from the time that their race first crawls out of the sea, like the need for gills, for example. The longer they go without the need for gills and the ability to breathe underwater, the further down into the genetic garbage that the DNA sequences for those genetic traits get pushed, becoming useless, no longer applicable with the current physical and genetic makeup. All races have these things. They're not functioning parts of their genetic strand, yet they are there nonetheless, because their species adapted, evolved beyond the need for them, based on the circumstances that they lived in. However, the O-key are completely lacking in this. The O-key have no genetic garbage, no leftover genetic sequences that are not used, that they evolved beyond. It's as if the O-key genetics were crafted in that manner, made to be exactly what they are, without the slightest bit of waste, without any evolution. It's as if they simply came into being as O-key, with no predecessing generations before. It's possible that there's something in your genetic sequence that simply rids yourself of these unnecessary genetic pieces. However, I have an alternate theory. I am actually beginning to believe that O-key were created, that you are not a natural race that was born and evolved from base-level organisms like most others, that some race decided to create you. For what purpose, I am uncertain. But whoever did create you, if that is in fact what happened, did quite a marvelous job. O-key are quite simply next to genetic perfection. Not a single wasted strand of DNA, a single sequence out of place. It is a perfect system. It's almost like art. You can't be serious, Mika said, a stunned expression on her face as she stared up at Dr. Ricola from her seat. My people weren't made in a laboratory. We're not lab rats. And your assertion doesn't make any sense. Every generation has mutation. That's how evolution works. Things adapt to everything, and everything that you adapt to changes you. Every time you get sick, your body develops a resistance to it. It deals with that danger, and in dealing with that danger, it changes. Those changes can be encoded into your DNA, so that next generation will have a stronger resistance to that ailment. And this creates a new genetic sequence in your DNA, that illness that you adapted to. Everything creates new genetic garbage. Yes, maybe for most, but I have found that this is not the case with the Oki. Let me demonstrate, Dr. Ricola said, taking out a data pad and placing it on the desk in order to interact with the holographic displays in the room. As she pressed a few buttons and a holographic display of a genetic sequence emerged. Everything appeared to be normal, at least at first glance. It looked like a strand of DNA, something that Mika had seen in scanners before. Now, this may look perfectly normal. However, this is just a small segment of your DNA. In order to truly see the big picture, sometimes you have to step back a bit, Dr. Ricola said, beginning to interact with the holographic display, zooming it out to show more and more of the genetic sequence. And as she zoomed out, a segment of DNA began to pop out. It seemed larger than the rest of the genetic strand. At that point, Dr. Ricola pointed at it, gesturing and beginning to expand that segment, zooming closer in on that one specifically. Upon zooming in on it, Mika saw something that looked very strange. It was like some strange cluster of DNA. Not a solid strand like the rest of it, but what appeared to be some large clump, like a bundle of DNA, like the DNA strand itself was a rope and a knot had been tied in it. What the hell is that? Mika said, staring at it wide-eyed, a little bit worried that something might be wrong with her. This is a scan of your genetic structure, of course, your DNA. And this bundle right here is the focal point of my interest in the Oki. You see, it may look like some random amalgamation, like meaningless nonsense, but I assure you it's not. It is in fact one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen, genetically speaking, of course. Currently, we do not have a name for this kind of structure in the genetic sequence, as it's basically unheard of, but I'm going to go with genetic bundle. You see, at this sequence in your genetic code, there is a bundle of genetic information, all comprised within this singular location along the genetic strand. Normally, garbage DNA is well scattered throughout the genetic strand, but your genetic strand has none. Instead, it has this bundle. At first, I assumed that perhaps it was an accumulation place for all of the genetic garbage that your race has no use for. But after examining it, I found that that was not the case. Rather, that this was simply an extremely dense segment of DNA within the strand. If you think of DNA like a program that makes a computer function, the computer being you, of course, this would be equivalent to what you might call an adaptive program. It is, in fact, a full adaptation system within your genetic code. This genetic bundle allows your race to adapt to basically anything, and at the same time, to never change. This small genetic bundle takes in the information that would normally be accumulated through evolution, even slight bits of it, like adapting to an ailment, quantifies it, and then reduces it to zero. So unlike any other organism on the face of the known universe, your species does not evolve, Rika. Yes, certainly they adapt. They adapt to any circumstance given to them, but only momentarily. They adapt until such time as the adaptation is not needed. As soon as this adaptation becomes useless, this genetic bundle destroys it, reducing it back to zero, nullifying that adaptation in order to ensure genetic purity and perfection. Not only does it much more rapidly adapt to anything, but it much more rapidly disposes of that adaptation. It's a stroke of genetic brilliance, if it was engineered that way, of course. I've never seen anything to its likeness. The Yoki are quite simply beyond the need for evolution, or perhaps simply incapable of it. It really depends on how you see it.